Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It is noon, so we're going to get going. The presentation should be around an hour and a half. We may finish a little early, which is great, but we'll see how many questions you guys have and that sort of things. I put the link to the slides in the chat if anyone wants to follow along like that, or you can bookmark that or download them or however you want to do that. I will note that the session is being recorded, so we're going to be putting the workshop online afterwards on the library's website. None of your information will be publicly viewable, though, so no worries about that. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. This is Preparing for Your Literature Review. I'm Justin Fuhr, and I'm joined by my co-presenter, Carolyn.
Hi,
Okay,
everyone.
so I'm a science librarian, and Carolyn's a health sciences librarian here at the University of Manitoba. So for today, we're going to walk you through literature reviews. So we're going to be addressing these, these six aspects of lit reviews. So we got a brief intro on literature reviews, and then Carolyn's going to walk you through the steps on, sorry, just muting people. Okay. The steps on how to complete a literature review, and then we'll go more in depth into some of these steps like developing your question. Then we'll do a demo on how to efficiently search the literature for sources to include in your review. We'll look at how to synthesize and analyze sources that you found are relevant for your review. And then we're going to be touching on how to write and then how to keep track and organize your sources. So there is a great library guide that Carolyn and some other librarians wrote on writing a literature review and all of the steps in gathering sources and that sort of thing. So I put the link in the chat there if you wanted to look at that. And then again, the slides for anyone joining late are just right there. There's the hyperlink. So what are literature reviews? So literature reviews, to use a quotation here from the University of Guelph, a literature review is both a summary and explanation of the complete and current state of knowledge on a limited topic. And it lists some of the sources that you could potentially use, such as academic books or journal articles. So literature reviews, they're also known as narrative reviews. There's a whole host of different review types that you could possibly work on or do research on. We'll be talking specifically in this session about literature reviews. And these are typically found in things like a lot of you are working on yourself, like theses or dissertations, books, and research articles. Sometimes these are part of a published review article, or sorry, sometimes they're published as standalone review articles, and sometimes they're part of a bigger research article that you'd run a study on, for example, and then you're reporting the results and discussing why those are important. Typically, authors or researchers put in a literature review of some kind, whether it's longer or maybe on more shorter side, but just to situate the reader on, like we were talking about before, that definition, a summary and explanation of the complete and current state of knowledge. So what has been found out so far, and then that really situates your research well, because then you'll be potentially or hypothetically adding to that body of literature, published literature already. So you are thinking about literature reviews, you're synthesizing the evidence in relation to your topic. So this is for, especially for writing a research article. You're going to be looking at what has been published, what has been found out so far on your specific topic. And then you're going to be talking about that, especially in relation to the topic of your paper, whatever that is, whether that's that assignment someone was working on or your thesis. So what's your research questions that you're looking at as part of your, bigger thesis as in your graduate program? Um, the literature review is going to be very important to that. You'll be highlighting sources that are very similar to or address some aspect of your research question, and you'll be summarizing those for the reader. And like that final bullet point says, is really just to set the scene for where you want the reader to go. You're going to be laying out a nice narrative of what's been published before, and then you'll be adding in your piece, what you found out. So this is an example of a literature review ish in this article entitled "Why So Few Still? Challenges to Attracting, Advancing, and Keeping Women Faculty of Color in Academia." So this is part of their introduction. They are picking out these sources and they're making a narrative on where this topic is currently. So you can see like, university as an institution is founded by and largely for men, for white men. They're quoting a source. Then they're going into how women or racialized groups were not allowed to pursue higher education. You can look at those studies to see, and they're recent, right, on some of the research that's been done in that area, and so on and so on. I'm just trying to find another good example, but you can read that there, and you can see how they found these sources. They've highlighted important or relevant pieces of those, and they're putting them together in a nice narrative to really set the scene for their own research. Literature reviews are not book reports. They're not undergraduate essays. They're not original studies. And they don't really involve critical appraisal. They're more, well, we could get into why literature reviews are not each of these. It's not just, book report. It's not going in depth into a single source, most likely. It's not kind of, writing an undergraduate essay where you're arguing a point, kind of like a persuasive essay, and then using sources to, support or disprove that point, that sort of thing. They're really used for synthesizing what's there in a way that's not just a summary, and they're analyzing the results or kind of the relevant points of each of these sources, but not just describing. It sounds easier said than done. I know that, but yeah, that's the whole point. There's some synthesis involved, and they provide some sort of analysis. Another point to note, though, is in that kind of brown box, I guess. Another good point to note is a good source, and by source we mean a citation or reference that you're using in your work, does not have to address your exact question or your exact scenario. It can address either an aspect of it, or maybe it's the same type of research question that you're working on, but just takes place in a different geographic location, or maybe uses a different population that you're studying. But maybe you guys are using the same survey tool, for example, and you want to bring up that source to just let the reader know, these researchers found this in this type of scenario or experiment or study, and that addresses or is relevant to your research in some way. Again, you're laying the stage or setting the stage for the reader to really engage in your own research. So why do we do it? It provides context for your research. That's exactly what we're talking about, where it's setting the stage. It summarizes the state of existing literature. That's the whole idea of you building on what's been published already. So you're bringing up this stuff, these researchers found this. This is kind of like the state of knowledge in this question or topic or whatever you're writing on. It also helps you identify gaps. So if you're searching in the literature and you find that no one has answered your specific question, or maybe you change your question slightly, maybe someone has, and maybe you change your question slightly to try to identify and fill in some gap in the literature that hasn't been written on or hasn't been researched before. It also provides a theoretical foundation for your research. So depending on what methodology you're using, you can bring up different research that really, proves that this methodology is adequate and measures whatever it is you're trying to measure in a certain particular way. You can bring up sources with that. And then again, the first bullet point is really, the last bullet point is very similar to the first one, but it situates your own work within existing research. One thing to keep in mind that can be really, really helpful as you're just embarking on a literature review is using what's called background sources. And if people don't, never encountered this term before, a background source is basically just identifying and describing the history of a well-defined research problem with reference to existing literature. That sounds a lot like our definition of a literature review, and it is sort of in the same way. But a background source is typically something like sometimes a book. Really, you can think of it like a textbook. Depending on what discipline you're in, it could be more of like a monograph or a book or an encyclopedia or handbook or something like that. And these background sources can really help you. They can help you understand your topic and the scope of your research. They can, if you're having trouble figuring out what exactly you want to study, they can really help identify aspects of interest that you find interesting and focus your research. They're also useful for identifying keywords to use. And this will come in very handy when we're talking about searching for sources in just a couple minutes here. Also, it can help you identify important authors in your field. So if you're reading a textbook or an encyclopedia on some topic and you run into some famous researcher or research group, you may want to look into that and highlight that in your literature review later on. These are examples of background sources that we were talking about. I already listed off most of these, so but just so you're aware, they synthesize a lot of research and can be very useful for brainstorming and just getting a handle on some foundational aspects of a topic. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Carolyn now.
Thanks, Justin. Hi, everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about the steps to undertaking a literature review. So there are 5 steps that have been identified to writing a literature review. This was first written in 2008 by Patricia Cronin and her colleagues. But step 1 is to formulate the question. The question is your basis for your lit review. So that is the first step, and it's probably the most important step. Number 2, searching the literature, so translating that question into a search strategy and executing that search strategy in a database to find relevant articles for your question. Number 3, reading and analyzing those articles, so trying to link those articles together in a way that makes sense for your question and to identify those themes within the literature. Number 4 is citing those references, so making sure that everything is cited properly. And then number 5, writing. I will say there is a question I saw in the Menti where someone was talking about a systematic way to do a lit review. So in terms of kind of the review hierarchy, Literature reviews don't have a strict methodology like you would find with scoping reviews and systematic reviews. So there isn't an established methodology to conducting a lit review, but these are kind of the steps to help you identify how to go about writing one. So just we're going to delve into these steps a little bit more. So number one, formulating that search question. So you're taking your topic and turning it into an actual question. You want to keep your question clear, concise, and focused. For a lit review, your question has to be narrow enough that you could answer it within the scope of a lit review and not too broad, because then you're dealing with kind of a scoping review aspect where, your question is too broad and there's just too many resources to bring into it. What can help you kind of develop your question is by using a question framework, and we'll get into these in a little bit. Number two, searching the literature. So you're going to select your databases. 1 to 2 databases is good for a lit review. Those databases should be relevant to your field of study. Justin will talk about that in a little bit. And then you're identifying the important concepts of your question. So if you've used a question framework or just kind of identified what those key components are of your question, you can translate that into a search strategy. So when we're talking about review articles, we consider this more of a secondary literature. So it would be in the same scope as scoping reviews, systematic reviews. And in order to write this secondary literature, what we really need is a primary literature. So we're looking for those individual studies, those individual research articles that will inform the review. Step 3, reading and analyzing. You're finding gaps, themes, conflicting information in the articles. There's kind of 2 popular ways to format your lit review, either thematically, so identifying those themes, or chronologically. So you can kind of identify how the topic has changed throughout the years. Pick what works best for your topic, but that thematic structure is typically the most popular. You want to write down the things that stand out to you while you're reading the articles, and sometimes it helps to have kind of a lit review matrix, which we'll go over later, or even just an article template in Excel where you're identifying the key components of an article to be able to compare those articles more effectively. So a tip I always recommend is while you're kind of pulling out that information from the research articles, be sure to differentiate using quotation marks versus paraphrasing. So later on down the road when you start writing, if you've pulled an actual quote from the article or if you've paraphrased it already in your own words. Next up is writing the article or writing the review. So you're highlighting those themes. Your paragraphs would be separated into those themes, highlighting the different articles and what the literature overall has found in relation to that theme. So you're really trying to connect the articles in a narrative way rather than, summarizing each article within the paper. You want to use quotes sparingly or to highlight it for an important point, right? We prefer paraphrasing over quotes. And just remember that this is an analysis, not a summary. And then step 5, citing. So citing your sources using the original article when you can. So rather than citing an article that has analyzed that original article, go to the original article itself. Using a citation manager tool to organize the references will really help you, and we'll talk about this later. And then double check that all the citation information that you've quoted in the article is in your reference list. Okay, so step 1, developing that research question. So one of the most important things that we talk about is turning your idea or your topic into an actual question, because oftentimes it can be really helpful If you think about, as you're trying to select resources for your lit review, if you have a question in mind, it makes it that much easier to really identify if that article really answers your question that you're trying to find. So turning your topic into a question can really help you kind of dig deep into what is relevant and what is not. So we want to condense our broad topics or broad concepts into a searchable question and focus on what's important. Focus on those important concepts within your topic to develop that question. So if you write out your topic, sometimes it helps just to underline what are the key words in your topic that need to be in your question and therefore need to be in your search strategy. So your question should typically have 2 to 3 main concepts. Some questions have more, but this can really impact the search. So if you're doing a search with 3 different concepts and you're getting thousands of results, that might indicate that your question is too broad. And for a lit review, right, we're trying to narrow down that question. We want to make a focused question to answer a lit review so that it could be answered in the scope of a lit review. But if you have an additional concept, sometimes adding that 4th concept can help narrow down the results if that's needed. So one tool that we suggest are question frameworks. So question frameworks can really help you take your topic and create a question. Question frameworks are typically discipline specific. So depending on your background, on the discipline that you're studying, that will help you kind of figure out which type of question framework to use. Question frameworks, they help identify those main concepts to inform your search and then guides you as well into the selection of your papers. So some examples of question frameworks could be like CPP, that should be CCP, or Cocoa Pop, Chip, Eclipse, Spider. There's many, many more. So if you click on that link there, it'll take you to another library guide where there's, over a dozen different question frameworks. And they're typically discipline specific, as I mentioned. So depending on which discipline you're studying, that will help you decide which question framework to use. So we're going to dive a little deeper into 3 different question frameworks. PICO is probably the original question framework. In this case, I have PICOS. There's also PICOT. So there's different variations, but PICO, P-I-C-O, is the original. And it came from medicine as a way to kind of highlight a clinical question and to develop that clinical question into a searchable search strategy. So the letters stand for the different concepts within your question. So for PICO, we have population or problem. So who are you studying or what are you studying? The I is the intervention. C is the comparison. O, outcome. And then in the case of PICOS, where we add the S, we're trying to identify the study types that will help us answer this question. So if we have this topic of older adults gaining free bus passes, does it decrease their isolation? We can create a question from that. So in older adults, do free bus passes reduce social isolation? And where the S comes in by identifying that it's qualitative studies, this can help us in our, as we're browsing for articles, to really identify what type of studies we're looking for, what type of articles we're looking for. Next up, we have SPICE. SPICE was developed for social science subjects. So the S would stand for setting, P for perspective. So, who is, for whom is this question for, or for whom is the research for? The I is intervention, C for control, E evaluation. So if we're talking about an elementary school setting, and we're thinking of it from the admin perspective, and we're trying to implement mindfulness activities, the question becomes, from the perspective of elementary school administration, what are the challenges of implementing mindfulness activities in the classroom? And then finally, we have CMO. So this was developed for management, policy, and education subjects. C would be the context. So which individuals am I studying? Kind of like population for PICO. Intervention, M for mechanisms. So what are the responses, or how do I explain the intervention? O for outcomes. So what am I hoping to find? And then if we've identified those 4 components, we have our question, how have source water protection programs been implemented, and what are the outcomes of these programs on Indigenous populations living in rural Canada? So that's just 3 question frameworks. There are many, many more, which you can access from the link on the previous slide. But if you're thinking about, well, what if my topic doesn't really fit nicely into a question framework? Well, the question framework's not so important as really just identifying those concepts, right? So if you can take your topic and you can kind of identify from your topic, what are the key words from this topic that need to be in my search? That is what is going to help you develop that search strategy and develop that question. And then also you might be thinking about, well, what if my intervention is complex? What if there's multiple components to my intervention? Like, for example, if we're looking at patient education strategies for patients with type 2 diabetes, you might be considering a variety of different interventions, right? Online versus in person, daily tracking versus one-on-one meetings, etc. So kind of the things you need to think about is it better for my interventions to lump them all together into one kind of umbrella of an intervention, or to split them? So do what works best for your topic, what you're trying to find for your outcomes. Sometimes, you also want to think about your search strategy, because if you're thinking about patient education interventions and that you kind of lump them all together into that broad umbrella, then that can really impact your search, because those individual interventions might not be found by kind of lumping them all together. So sometimes we just kind of split the difference, if that makes sense, in the search, so that you can find as much as possible. Sometimes using a logic map or concept map to prioritize your interventions can be quite helpful. And then finally, kind of considering, is this question going to be answerable within the scope of a lit review? So I mentioned before how broader questions, very broad questions, are more applicable for like a scoping review or those larger review types. For a lit review, you really want to make sure that your question is concise and clear in order to be able to answer it within the framework of a lit review. Okay, so we have this topic. Cell phone usage is sometimes linked to mental health outcomes such as depression or anxiety. This is especially the case in young adults. Moderate or low cell phone usage could improve mental health outcomes. So this is I would consider this more a health sciences question. I guess it could be social sciences as well. But what type of question framework from the 3 we just discussed do you think would work best for this topic? PICO. Yeah. Nora, that's what I said as well.
Social science?
Yeah, SPICE could work as well. Justin, do you want to go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I did think of it more of a health sciences perspective. That's probably from my health sciences bias. And so I used Pico. The nice thing about Pico is it's fairly flexible, and I think although it is really for health sciences, it really does translate well to other subjects, because really you're just trying to identify your intervention, your population, and your outcome, right? So it's fairly straightforward. So we have this topic, cell phone usage, et cetera. So what do you think the population or problem would be? Population and problem would be
The young adults.
young adults, yeah. And then the intervention. So what is it that we're trying to study? Yeah, cell phone use. Absolutely. Level of usage, yeah. Level of usage of the cell phone, right? So if we're thinking about how this would translate to a search, usage is important, but so is cell phone, right? Like having that key term cell phone in our search strategy is really is important. So we are also trying to identify what are the words that need to be in the articles that we retrieve in order for them to be relevant to our question. So we have cell phone usage as our intervention, our comparison. Maybe if we're talking about excessive cell phone usage as intervention, then the comparator could be moderate or low cell phone usage. And then the outcome. What will the cell phone usage lead to? Or what are, yeah, mental health. Thank you, Nora. Yes. So mental health. Yes, so our PICO, we have young adults, excessive cell phone use versus moderate or low cell phone use, and then we're trying to see how that impacts mental health. So we've taken this topic, and then we've created a question from it by identifying those 4 components. So among young adults, does excessive cell phone use impact mental health outcomes such as depression and anxiety? So those 4 key components that we've identified that need to be in the question, we've identified them and created a question from that. And now I'll pass it back to Justin.
Great. Thanks, Carolyn. Okay, so I'll talk about searching literature now. So just imagine that, well, you either have your research question already, like in real life, but in the context of this workshop, we have our excessive cell phone usage, mental health question, and then we're going to want to find sources that relate to that question. How do we do that? You're going to want to select a database or databases that are relevant for your area of study. We just listed a couple examples here. So Medline for health or Archive for physics and astronomy, ERIC for education. There's all sorts of different databases you can use. You can use some of these more broader databases that reach far beyond disciplines. So things like Web of Science or Scopus. These are all really great places to look. These are all really great places that Carolyn and I would suggest you use when you're completing a literature review like this. Nothing wrong with Google Scholar. Google Scholar has a lot of limitations, though, and also there's quite a lot of material in there. It can be really hard to sift through in terms of saving your time. If you do need help thinking about or brainstorming where to look, ask your subject librarian for sure. You can also, we have a subject guide set up for all the different disciplines that the University of Manitoba has here. And even if you're just on the library's homepage and you click databases A to Z, you can see a full listing of all of our databases, but you can also filter down based on discipline or subject area. Okay, when you're talking about searching, where to search is one of the most important things, but then what to search is also important. So one of the things that Carolyn and I find very useful is using what's called a search map. And you can use a search map to identify important keywords or concepts to create your search. Now, the first part, right, that we're talking about, you need your research question. And if you're really thinking about it, like not necessarily comprehensively or systematically, but if you're making your research question into these very clearly defined concepts, it's going to be a lot easier when you're going into any of these databases to search for literature and really, at the end of the day, save you time. It's going to make it more efficient. You're going to find most of or shouldn't say that, but you're going to find very relevant articles that are going to be supporting your literature review. So I'm going to I put that link to the Google Doc in there. You can open that up and it'll have a very similar table that we have on this screen here. And Carolyn and I are getting your help to fill in this search map. So the whole idea is we have our research question. We've highlighted these major, major concepts, cell phones, mental health, young adults, and we need synonyms or related keywords to each of these concepts. And what we're going to be doing is linking all of these keywords together so we can search for sources with any of these keywords included for these three different concepts. So I'll just give you a couple minutes. I'll go in, check it out, and then we'll try a search using all of these keywords linked together. Okay, this is a great list. While you guys are busy doing that, I've been adjusting a search we're going to be using. Okay, so this is great. You guys can keep adding to that, but don't worry about that for now.
But Justin, did you see the question about the filters?
I don't know if I totally understand that. Did you?
Yeah, so in the databases, there's different age ranges so when we're talking about young adults, we also have to clarify, are we talking about, 18 to 21-year-olds? Are we talking about adolescents like teenagers, 13 to 18-year-olds? So really clarifying the age range would be also an important consideration for this question.
Excellent point. Yeah, an excellent question as well. Okay. Okay, so we got our search map. This is an example one that Carolyn and I had made, and it looks very strikingly similar to the one that we made also. So we're on the right track here. Okay, so search tips, just to cover briefly, you can use a mix of what's called controlled vocabulary or subject headings, as well as your keywords. And your keywords are those ones that we were just entering in, which is great. The more, not necessarily the more the better, but searching is all about testing something. And then if it's not coming up with what exactly you're looking for, or there's too many results, you're going to be modifying that slightly. The idea of subject headings, not to get too far into it, but they're controlled in the sense that there's a certain term to refer to a certain concept. So where we were just brainstorming all of these different keywords, databases will use specific terms to identify a particular concept. And if you don't know that term, right, it could be difficult. But the idea of controlling these is that, not every, but a lot of sources tagged with these very specific subject headings are going to be all, similar in some way. And often sources will have multiple subject headings. But if you wanted to, and we're not going to get too deep into it right now, but you can search for subject headings so you know which ones refer to what concepts, and then you can incorporate those into your search as well. Today, we're just going to be focusing on keywords, though. You can also, someone was talking about the ages, and they put that in the filters area, which can be very important to filter out sources. So you can filter in different ways. You can filter by language. So maybe you only want English language sources. That's a filter. Maybe you only want sources published in the last 20 years or 15 years. That's a filter that you can use, or a limit to use, to reduce the amount of sources popping up. And also, when Carolyn was talking about interventions or not interventions, kind of like the type of studies that you're looking for, that is something you can filter out as well as publication types. So maybe you're looking for only review articles, or maybe you're only looking for primary research articles that describe a study, right? You can filter those out as well. The whole idea is you want to test different ways of describing your search or your search string. So you're going to be using different combinations of these. You also want to consider searching for important authors or researchers that you know of, or specific theories and methodologies as well. We also suggest saving your search too. So to do that, you can often create a free account on many of these databases. You can then save your search. Each database is set up slightly differently, but this just keeps track of what you've done so far. If you're really trying to build on kind of the searching you've done previously, it'll save you a ton of time. If you save your search, you can just rerun it and find those same search results again. Okay, so we'll just show you what it looks like in Scopus. I'm just going to copy. Okay, so, well, I guess first, I just show you. So these are the three concepts that we had identified before: the idea of a cell phone or cell phone use. And you can modify these. This is just a quick example, but then the second one on mental health, and then the third one on young adults. And we're trying to capture these three concepts in whatever it is we're looking for, or in the sources that we're looking for, to write our lit review. So in this case, we're going to go to Scopus here. There's a hyperlink in your slides that you can use, but I have it pulled up already. And so this is the home page on Scopus. This is what it looks like. I had created an account previously, quite a while ago, so you can always do that as well if you're talking about saving your search like we were talking about earlier. And basically from here, there's two options. You can just search right from this homepage. This is called a basic search, but it's totally great to use. The default is set for searching keywords in the article title and the abstract, and then also the database or author supplied keywords. And all you would do is just type in your search query here. Me and Carolyn had divided up our search using parentheses, and all that does is keep each of those concepts separate. It's basically like a mathematical formula where, I'll just pull that up again, where we're putting parentheses around each of these concepts. So it's going to be searching for the idea of the cell phone, and then the idea of mental health, and the idea of young adult. Okay, so this is the example of an advanced search. I don't want to get too into it because you could talk probably for an hour just on how to structure an advanced search. The main idea, though, is that we're taking our three concepts and we're putting parentheses around each of these concepts. And we're separating each of the keywords or search phrases with the word or. And this is a very common way in these databases to search for multiple keywords all at once. So I could run multiple searches trying different permutations of cell phones, like cell space phone, or cellular phone, but I want to search for all of them all at once. So all I'm doing is putting the word or between each of my keywords within each of these search concepts in parentheses. And then all I'm doing is typing the word and to link all these together. So we're searching for either cell phone, all one word, or mobile or smartphone. And we also want to search for the idea of mental health. And then we're structuring that search concept in much the same way, mental health or depression or anxiety, and so on until I'm linking my three concepts all together. And then I'm going to search. And you could do this in the basic search as well. It's just that I pulled out the advanced search example. Okay, so we found just over 4,000 documents, quite a lot. It would take me a long time to look through all of these. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort them. Hopefully that's big enough for you guys to see. I'm going to sort them by relevance. Right now, they're sorted by the newest or the most latest article first, so 2024 articles, but I want to look for the most relevant sources. So this doesn't change that 4,000 number. All it does is just reorder the sources, so more relevant sources pop up at the top. So then at this point, I have a number of different things I could do. First, 4,000 is quite a lot, but it's not too crazy. What I could do is possibly limit the keywords that I'm using. Maybe one keyword is, bringing in irrelevant results. Maybe I want to filter my results in different ways. And all of the different filters are on the left-hand side here. Maybe I don't want to do any of that, and I'm just going to start looking through these sources. What I would do is first read the title. The title is going to be very descriptive, obviously, of what the source is about. You'll be able to figure out whether it's relevant or not by the title, like quite quickly. Like this one, for example, factors associated with neck, shoulder pain in young adults. Has probably some aspect of using a cell phone and then that pain may be affecting their mental health in some way, right? It has the young adults thing. But probably, I mean, I can't say for sure because I'm not actually writing this, but probably that's not going to be relevant to our research question. Whereas some of these other ones, you can see this one, I mean, it doesn't have the neck shoulder pain, but it has sleep problems. Someone actually mentioned insomnia. So that may or may not be relevant. And I would just go through reading some of these. Okay, so then I come to number 8 here. Young adult depression and anxiety linked to social media use, assessment and treatment. This one seems really great. It's not specifically talking about cell phone, right? Social media, but that cell phone is probably the most common way to access social media. And then what I would do is the next thing, I would just click on show abstract. I'm going to read this abstract. And I'm going to see, okay, so let's say this one's really great. I want to read this one because this one seems like something I want to include in my literature review, or at least grab the PDF, save a copy of it, and then I'll come back to it or maybe read it a little bit more in depth. So how do you access this? If you clicked on the hyperlink title, it brings you to the screen with a lot of information on it, which is great. You can, skim this or read more about this in more detail if you really wanted to. But I want to read this article. So how do I do that? From this page, I'm not actually signed. signed in. We're just going to go back one step. Okay, so number 8 is what I want. I'm going to click on this view at publisher link. This will bring me through to the journal homepage or journal page where this article is hosted. From here, because I'm currently on the U of M campus, it's giving me access right away. You can see access provided by the University of Manitoba. That's great. If you're at home or somewhere else off campus, you would have had to sign in between this page and clicking on View It at Publisher and here. And all I would do, because I'm already signed in, I'm just going to click on Download PDF. And this is going to download it to my computer. And then I can organize it in any number of ways that Carolyn will talk a little bit about in a second here. The other thing you can do is you can click on this check access button. It's yellow because or gold because that's the U of M color. This actually brings you to our University of Manitoba Libraries catalog entry for this source. It's just adding another step though. But sometimes that view it publisher link isn't there. And then you can use this link right here, view it, full text. And this is going to bring me to that same journal homepage where I can download the PDF. So that's using a database in like 10 or 15 minutes. Like I'm saying, we could talk about this for a long, long time on different ways to search and pull up sources, but that's just a quick demo on how you would get access to this stuff. Okay. Oops. Okay. So synthesis and analysis. So once you have the sources that you're looking at, you already have a good bundle of sources. You've done at least a little bit of reading onto them. You know that this is the stuff you're going to be wanting to use. What do you do next? You want to read the papers critically, and you're looking for common themes or theories. That's something to tie the papers together. So that's what we're talking about. Identify some themes that are present across all of these papers. And you're really going to be noting anything that seems out of place. So, for example, one paper uses very different outcomes. That's going to be something you're going to want to highlight in your review. That's going to be very important. Consider what you must describe and what you might not want to describe. So if something keeps coming up over and over again, you're going to want to describe that. You're going to want to include that in your literature review, but maybe there's something else that only is in one of your sources that you're including, and maybe you don't want to talk about that. Totally fine. It's totally up to you on how you're writing a literature review. There are so many different ways. There's so many different lengths of review as well. Important thing though is you're not summarizing. You're not saying source 1 says da da da. Source 2 says da da da. You're tying it in, and you really want to that's why it's called narrative review as well. You're building a narrative of these sources. You're not just summarizing the results. And it is quite a skill to put all of these together in a really cohesive way. But there's a lot of different ways to do it, which is nice. Comparing and contrasting ideas, views, and results from the different papers is very important. So, one research team did it this way, one research team did it that way, one research team found this as results, one found, conflicting results. You're going to want to highlight those and talk about them. Are there any major debates in the literature, strong opinions for and against whatever topic it is you're talking about? There's, is there any distinct changes in the way that these researchers have approached the topic over time? Maybe some major technological invention or, became commonplace and now everyone does it this way. You're going to want to highlight that and maybe note a couple of examples. Is there consensus across papers about a course of action or treatment approach? Talking about health sciences here, but yeah, you're going to want to highlight these different things in the literature, really set the stage for your reader and for your research, your own research. In terms of how to organize the sources, totally up to you. It's your choice. These are just some examples of what you could do thematically. So you've noticed these different themes coming out. You highlight, 3 or 4 of them throughout your review, put them under subheadings. You could do them chronologically. Maybe that makes most sense for capturing the breadth of research, major trends. Maybe it's methodological. Different sources are using different methodologies. Mix it up. Current situation, history, methodology, a combination of these. Totally up to you. These are just some ideas to get you thinking that it makes it easier for the reader if you've organized your sources in some way rather than source 1, source 2, source 3, right? You want to tie these up in a really cohesive way to interest your reader. Okay, so the literature review matrix. Okay, I actually missed here. You can download a copy of that search map using that link there, the one without all of our brainstorming in. This is the link to a literature search matrix, which again, me and Carolyn aren't going to ask you to fill that in this time. But you can download this for your own use if you want. The nice thing about that literature review matrix, it compiles details of your articles and it has a nice table for you to write about the main concepts that appear in these articles. And if a concept only appears once, keep searching, right? Never stop searching. Well, eventually you will, but and don't expect that all articles will cover all of your concepts that you're looking at, right? Again, maybe one source only talks about one aspect, but it's a really important one that you want to bring up. For some reason, it's important to your paper. That's up to you to decide. Yeah, all of the stuff that you're bringing up in your literature review doesn't have to be on the exact research question that you're looking at. So this is an example of how you could use this literature review matrix, talking about just writing down something about the author info, and then your research question is written out with these different concepts. You're pulling out quotes or you're writing about results found in some of these different sources. And then there's room to put your own thoughts too. And then it just summarizes. If you've ever looked through a lot of something, right, organization is key. And this is one way to just organize your thoughts, not wasting time while you're reading. So you're reading it, you're typing in these different things. And then when it comes time to the writing piece of it, you're already many, many steps ahead without having to go back over and over again to reread things. Oh, which study said this thing? Oh, well, pull up my matrix and it's written right there. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Carolyn to talk about writing and also keeping track of your sources.
Thanks, Justin. So staying organized is one of the key aspects of setting yourself up for success. Sorry, next slide. Thanks. So you want to build a system that works for you. And maybe this is quite obvious, but creating a research folder for your lit review will really help you stay organized. I do see a lot of students that kind of have their articles and their papers on their desktop. So, creating that folder just to keep things all together and maybe creating subfolders too can be really helpful just to keep everything intact and so you can easily access your documents and your files when you need them. So some of the things you do want to save are your search strategies in order to go back to them later, because once you get to the writing portion, you might forget exactly what you did. And your search is so integral, right? That's your data collection. So if you don't have your methods properly written out, then that can really put into question your methodology for your whole lit review. So your search strategies, your RAS or your text files. So those are the records, the articles that you pulled out. from each of the databases. And I say to keep these because if for whatever reason you lose those articles or you lose the number of articles that you retrieved from your database, if you have those RAS text files, you can go back to them later to figure out the number of articles you retrieved and which articles you retrieved. You don't need to keep track of which article came from which database. That's not important, but the number from each database could be helpful, and the records, the citation records for the articles will be helpful. And then your lit review matrix too, if you're filling that out, you'll want to save that. So document your search strategy. So as I mentioned, this is your data collection, right? So you want to collect more information that's needed on what you did to retrieve those articles. So you want to keep track of your exact searches, the keyword subject headings you used, how you created that concept. So which were the concepts you used, which were the keywords you used, and then if you used any filters or limits in your search, the date that you searched, can be helpful because database numbers change on a daily basis. So if you go back to that search a month later, the numbers that you originally retrieved will be different than they are today. So you want to figure out the date of the search because then you can go back to within the database. You can limit to just that date to find out what the numbers are. The database name, and the database platform. So sometimes we see people say, I searched EBSCOhost. Well, there's about 50 different databases on EBSCOhost. So you really need to narrow down exactly which database that you searched within EBSCOhost. So EBSCOhost is the platform, just like Ovid's a platform, ProQuest is a platform, but you want to gather not just the platform, but the actual database. The number of results that were retrieved from the search and the number of articles that you selected from the search. So those are the key numbers you want to pull. So if you open that search map, Justin, do you want to just open that tracking search strategy document? So if you scroll down and if you saved the one that Justin sent previously in the chat, the empty document, this is those are the key elements that you want to save. So you have your database name, the platform, the date that you searched, the number of results, and then I suggest either copy and pasting the actual search strategy or just taking a screenshot of the search strategy so that you have those and you can revert back. What's even better is if you can save that search within the database platform because that will save you time if you have to rerun it later. But if that's too complicated for you and you feel like you just kind of need the search strategy, then just doing a screenshot or copy and pasting can be helpful. And you want to do that with all the database searches that you conduct.
Sorry, this is my bad because I had to clear the cache.
Oh yeah, right.
Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. I wonder if it'll just let me do this. See. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so writing up those search methods. So you do want to include a paragraph on your methodology, on what the search that you used, the databases that you searched, if you used any filters in your search, and you want to, if you can, include your search strategy in some capacity so that people who are reading your lit review better understand the terminology that you used to retrieve those results. So these are two examples of published literature reviews that describe their search methods. So if you want to go to the next slide, Justin. So they include the exact databases, In the example of the second article there, they also include the platform that they use to search that database because, for example, Medline is available on PubMed and it's also available on Ovid, and your numbers will be different between those two databases, so that's why we identify the platform. You identify the filters, and then you identify whether you use subject headings or keyword searches. So yes, this is not a systematic review, so you're not keeping track to the extent you would a systematic review. However, your methods are important, and so keeping track of everything that you've done will help you later on when you're writing those search methods to figure out exactly what you did and to be able to describe what you did. And more we're seeing where publishers are expecting, even with a lit review, that you have a strong methodology in how you retrieve those articles, or that you can properly describe how you retrieve those articles. Because this, again, is your data collection. So you need to be able to describe what you did and make sure it's reproducible. So one way to help you keep track of your articles is by using a citation manager. So there's two here that we support at the libraries that are free, Zotero and Mendeley. Either one, they both kind of work the same way. My personal preference is Zotero. However, Mendeley is great. It's really just pick a citation manager that will work best for you. For a lit review, I do recommend a citation manager because not only will it help you stay organized and keep track of your PDFs, you can organize it by the themes. So you can organize your articles by the different paragraphs within your paper to keep you on track for your organization. Justin, do you mind going to the next slide, please? So you can save those PDFs in those folders. You can also use the Microsoft Word browser extension so that your citation manager syncs within Word, and so it inputs those articles within the citation style that you're using. So it really just helps you save time to make sure that your citations are formatted correctly and that they're all in there in your paper. So we're not going to go too much in depth with citation managers today, but our colleague Carol Cook has two great library guides, Managing Your References with Zotero, which is a workshop that she does every semester. The guide itself has a link to the video of the workshop, and then also some basic information on how to do some basic functionality within Zotero and Mendeley. So I really recommend those two sites. So that would be the first link under Zotero and the first link under Mendeley. Those are really great resources to get you started with your citation manager. And that's all kind of the content we have for you today. So we really love to know what you thought of today's session, if there's any topics that you thought we could touch on in future sessions, what you like, what you didn't like, really helps us to build upon this session. So yes, Justin put the link to the survey in the chat.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the session today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Maybe we could go to Mentimeter, Justin, and answer some of those questions. So I see a question about using AI for searching for similar articles. So there are some great AI tools to help you with your lit review. Research Rabbit is one that is a great resource where it kind of does some citation tracking. So you can put in one article that you really like and then kind of see what are related articles to that. Actually, so our colleagues do a workshop on using generative AI for library research. I'll find the link and put it in the chat because that would be a good video to look at.
A lot of questions here.
Great questions.
Okay. I've reviewed the literature already. How do I put together the information gathered from the articles reviewed? So that'll really depend on so many factors that it's pretty much impossible for me to be able to, or Carolyn to be able to tell you how, right? Are you looking at a source? Why? How come you highlighted the source? Is it, you know, does it have results that you're going to be wanting to use in your paper? And so you're going to want to review that. Does it use a similar, like I was saying, like survey instrument, and that you're talking about the effectiveness of that? That's why it's in there. Is it a previous study, landmark study that you want to make sure to cite because it's been, heavily cited over the last 4 years and you want to put that in? Is that why? So all of that, the reasons will really determine what information exactly you're talking about from that article, right? Remember we were saying you want to highlight themes of different sources that you found. That'll you'll want to highlight that in some way. It's really hard to say exactly how though, but using those organization tools that we were talking about, organizing your literature review in some way, that'll help determine which sources you're including or excluding and what information you're pulling from those. How to synthesize and report quantitative findings in a way that doesn't appear to be clotheslining numbers.
One thing to think about is if you want to put it into some kind of chart. So we'll often see this within a lit review on, if you're looking at the quantitative numbers, you can look at the different studies, describe their methodology, the population that they studied within these studies, and their outcomes. And that's a good way to just kind of briefly outline the different studies and their results. And then you can discuss the key aspects within your actual paper in a narrative way. But that way you kind of have the data out there so that it's easier for the reader to understand the link between the articles or the quantitative data that's coming from the articles. Are there any other questions?
I wanted to read that question about the theoretical foundations, but I couldn't see it all. Maybe I can reload it. But basically, I think I got the gist of the question. Now it's going to restart the survey, I think. Oh, no, here we go. Oh, yeah. I want to learn how best to consider the theoretical foundations. I've heard people say they've grounded their research using the blank theory. I'm not sure how I cannot consider all relevant theory. This is probably beyond me and Carolyn's wheelhouse, unless Carolyn wants to weigh in. I would suggest asking if you're writing your thesis, ask your thesis supervisor. They should have a good answer, a good response on how you should go about this. That'd probably be what I suggest. Okay, and not to inundate you guys with surveys, but the libraries is running a library or campus-wide pulse survey, life pulse survey. They want to get your pulse, get your opinion on our different library services and spaces, and it's all to improve your campus community and your experience of the libraries on campus. If you at all have any opinions on any library services or anything library related, spaces, study spaces, that sort of thing, highly encourage you guys to fill this survey out. The changes, like, you can affect change by filling out this survey. Like, the responses are taken very, very seriously. So if you have any time at all, I think it takes 10 or 15 minutes total, but that pulse survey, library pulse survey, will yeah, it's I highly encourage you to fill it out if you have any spare time.